Today, we're unpacking the details of an event that has completely baffled the FBI, art historians, and true crime enthusiasts for decades now. We are looking at the world's largest unsolved art heist, the 1990 Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft in Boston. It's wild to think about, but even after over 30 years, no arrests have been made and not a single stolen piece has been recovered. The sheer audacity of the crime and the unbelievable cultural loss is just absolutely staggering.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Picture it. It's the early hours of Sunday, March 18th, 1990. The city of Boston is just kind of winding down from all the St. Patrick's Day weekend revelry. Just outside the museum, a hatchback is parked, about 100 feet from the side entrance. And inside that car, two men disguised as police officers. In just 81 minutes, they're going to completely bypass museum security and pull off a heist that would echo through history. Let's look at exactly how they executed this ticking clock operation.
You can see how methodically this whole night unfolded. Around 12:30 a.m., those fake officers were actually spotted by partygoers who just assumed they were real cops. Inside, the night shift was manned by two guards, Rickabath, a regular, and Randy Heastand, who was literally working his very first night shift. Talk about a bad first day at work, right? After some strange fire alarm anomalies on Abath's initial patrol, he actually buzzed the two fake officers right into the building. The thieves quickly overpowered and bound both guards. But notice that 1:48 a.m. timestamp. The museum's infrared motion detectors didn't record footsteps in the second-floor Dutch room until 13 minutes after the guards were subdued. They were patient. They waited to ensure no real police had been alerted before they went to work. It wasn't until the morning shift arrived that the real police were finally called, and they found Abath and Heastand tied up down in the basement.
Once inside the Dutch room, the thieves didn't exactly show much reverence for the priceless artifacts they were surrounded by. This wasn't some delicate Hollywood-style operation, it was a brutal physical extraction. As they approached the art, a proximity sensor sounded. You know, one of those devices meant to warn patrons if they get too close. The thieves just smashed it. Then, they yanked these heavy, historic masterpieces off the walls, throwing them onto the marble floor, which violently shattered their glass frames. Finally, using a blade, they crudely sliced the canvases right out of their wooden stretchers.
By the time they walked out the door, the thieves had stolen 13 works of art. The haul was an absolutely staggering cultural loss. They took some of the most recognizable names in art history. We're talking Johannes Vermeer, Rembrandt, Edgar Degas, Edward Monet, and Govert Flinck. But they also grabbed a few really highly unusual items, an ancient bronze Chinese beaker known as a gu, and a French imperial eagle finial that just sat atop a flagpole. To truly understand the gravity of this theft, we have to look closely at what was lost, starting with Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, painted in 1633. This isn't just any Rembrandt, it is the Dutch master's only seascape, ever. The historical significance is immense, and its financial value matches that completely. Estimates have placed the value of this single canvas at roughly $140 million. But more than just the money, an utterly singular piece of human history was effectively stolen from the public eye.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how one singular painting accounts for half of the entire theft's estimated value. Vermeer's The Concert is an incredibly rare masterpiece. There are only 34 known Vermeer paintings attributed to him in existence. 34 in the entire world. Because of its extreme rarity and historical weight, The Concert was estimated in 2015 to be worth $250 million on its own. Experts widely consider this to be the most valuable stolen object on the planet.
When you add it all up, the financial magnitude is almost difficult to comprehend. $500 million. In the year 2000, the FBI raised their official estimate of the stolen art's value to that $500 million mark. And it doesn't even stop there. In more recent years, prominent art dealers have suggested the total value could actually sit closer to an astonishing $600 million. This firmly cements the Gardner heist as the highest value museum robbery in recorded history, no question about it.
But analyzing the thieves' behavior reveals some completely baffling, contradictory choices that have puzzled investigators from day one. I mean, look at this breakdown. Yes, they took the high-value Vermeer and Rembrandt, but they also took those low-value oddities. That 12th century BC Chinese gu was worth maybe a few $1,000s, a tiny fraction of the paintings. Even stranger is what they left behind. They actually took a large Rembrandt self-portrait off the wall, but left it leaning against a cabinet, opting instead to steal a tiny, postage stamp-sized Rembrandt etching. Investigators suspect the larger portrait was left simply because it was painted on heavy wood rather than canvas, which just made it too cumbersome to carry out.
Moving on to our next section. The Rogues Gallery, Suspects and Dead Ends. Let's see who might have actually pulled this off.
So, who actually did it? With no conclusive DNA or fingerprints left behind, investigators just couldn't prove the prints they found belonged to the thieves rather than the museum employees. And a lot of the early DNA evidence was lost or inconclusive. Authorities naturally turned to the criminal underworld. One major theory revolves around the Patriarca crime family, specifically a gangster named Bobby Donati. Boston in the early 90s was right in the middle of a brutal internal mafia gang war. The FBI heavily investigated the theory that Donati organized the heist to use the priceless art as leverage to negotiate his Kepa regime's release from prison. But before the authorities could crack him, Bobby Donati was violently murdered in 1991 during that very same gang war, taking whatever secrets he had straight to the grave.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because this web of criminals only gets more tangled. Donati's associate, a jailed New England art thief named Miles J. Connor Jr., actually spoke to authorities. Connor claimed he and Donati had cased the Gardner Museum together in the past. Seeking his own freedom, Connor pointed the FBI toward an antique dealer named William P. Youngworth. Youngworth eventually stepped up and claimed that he had access to the paintings and could return them, but only if his intense demands for full immunity and Connor's release from prison were met.
This Youngworth lead resulted in one of the most cinematic moments of the whole investigation. In 1997, a journalist named Tom Mashberg was driven to a midnight rendezvous at a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. There, in the pitch black, he was shown a painting by the dim beam of a flashlight. Mashberg reported seeing what looked like Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee being slowly unfurled, noting cracking on the canvas and even the master's signature on the ship's rudder. It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? However, this suspenseful lead ultimately fizzled out. Authorities noted that the heavy varnish on the real stolen Rembrandt wouldn't allow it to be easily unfurled like a paper poster, and paint chips supplied by Youngworth flat out didn't match the stolen artwork.
The FBI didn't just look at the Italian mafia, though. They explored other massive criminal elements operating at the time. They heavily investigated infamous Boston crime boss Whitey Bulger. Bulger had notoriously strong ties to the Boston police, which could definitely explain how the thieves got such convincing uniforms. They also looked closely at the Provisional IRA, a paramilitary group that actually used the tactic of tripping fire alarms prior to an operation as a signature calling card. Despite Bulger's ties to the IRA, investigators never found any concrete evidence linking either of them to the Gardner heist.
And then you have the strange communications. In 1994, museum director Ann Hawley received this anonymous letter from someone claiming to be a third-party negotiator. This writer proved their credibility by sharing details only the FBI and the museum knew at the time. They explicitly claimed the artwork was safe in a non-common law country in climate-controlled conditions. The demand? Immunity for everyone involved, and $2.6 million deposited into an offshore account. The museum attempted to signal back via a coded message in the Boston Globe, exactly as instructed. But the trail just went completely cold.
So, the crucial point is, to this day, the museum has never stopped fighting to get its collection back, primarily using the power of money. Initially backed by Sotheby's and Christie's, the reward started at $1 million. But over the decades, it grew. Today, it stands at an unbelievable $10 million for information leading directly to the recovery of all items in good condition. This remains the absolute largest bounty ever offered by a private institution in history.
But what makes this $10 million reward even more enticing is the bizarre, almost unbelievable legal reality of the case today. The statute of limitations, which is the strict legal deadline for prosecutors to bring charges for the theft, actually expired way back in 1995. Federal prosecutors have stated on the record that anyone who willingly returns these items today will not face theft charges. So the thieves, or whoever holds the art right now, could theoretically just walk in, hand it over, claim the massive bounty, and walk away entirely free. No way, right? But it's true.
If you visit the museum today, the absence of the art is heavily felt. And that's largely because of the museum's founder. Isabella Stewart Gardner left behind a very strict will when she died in 1924. She decreed that her collection was to be maintained exactly as she arranged it for the public. Nothing was ever to be permanently moved, added, or sold from the galleries. It was locked in time.
Because the museum is bound by that strict will, the curators made a deeply poignant decision. The empty wooden frames that once held the Vermeers, the Rembrandts, and the other masterpieces were hung right back up on the walls. If you walk through the Dutch Room today, you're confronted by these haunting empty frames. They serve as a powerful tribute to the stolen art, a stark reminder of the cultural theft, and honestly, as optimistic placeholders just waiting for the art's eventual return.
3 decades, hundreds of leads, a $10 million reward, and an expired statute of limitations, yet the trail remains frustratingly dark. It leaves us with the ultimate question. Where is a $500 million haul of the world's most famous art hiding today? Is it sitting in some billionaire's secret vault, tucked away in a dusty attic somewhere in Boston? Or is it just lost to the elements forever? And will those empty frames in the Gardner Museum ever finally be filled? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open, because you never know where history is hiding.